For months, they saw her as just a quiet cleaning lady, until she heard that secret code and access systems no one else could reach. The ghost operator hadn't really died. She had just been hiding. What city are you watching from today? If you believe stories of hidden heroes need to be told, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Every morning at exactly 4 a.m., she walked through the gate like clockwork, silent as a shadow, invisible as morning mist. No one knew her name. The security log simply read Cleaning Staff M. Stone. Nothing more, nothing less. Maria Stone appeared to be 47 years old, medium height with graying brown hair always pulled back in a tight, regulation bun. Her eyes seemed perpetually focused downward, studying floors that needed cleaning, corners that required attention. She wore the same faded navy coveralls every day, a plain cloth cap pulled low over her weathered face, and thick work gloves that completely concealed her hands. In the 8 months she'd been working at Northern Command Air Base, not a single person had bothered to make eye contact with her. She was part of the infrastructure, like the heating system or the fluorescent lights, essential but invisible, necessary but ignored. The base itself was a sprawling complex in the Colorado mountains, specializing in advanced radar training and classified aircraft maintenance. It was the kind of place where secrets went to gather dust and personnel went to disappear from public view. Most of the soldiers stationed there were young, ambitious, focused on their careers, and convinced they understood how military operations really worked. But if anyone had been paying attention, really paying attention, they would have noticed peculiarities about the quiet cleaning woman that should have raised questions. Maria always spent extra time cleaning around emergency exits, wiping down systems that weren't on any maintenance schedule. She lingered near radar installations longer than necessary, her cloth moving methodically over surfaces while her eyes tracked every component, every wire, every connection point. She'd memorized the rotation schedule of every security camera on the base, moving through blind spots with an efficiency that spoke of careful planning rather than random chance. Her daily route never varied. Command center first, then communications hub, then the individual hangars, always ending at Hangar 7. She carried herself with a subtle confidence that didn't match her supposed role, and her hands, when the gloves came off during break times, bore small scars that looked suspiciously like knife cuts and burn marks from electronic equipment. Who pays that much attention to a janitor anyway? The morning everything changed started like any other. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, a 28-year-old communications specialist with 3 years of active duty under his belt, had been assigned to run emergency preparedness drills. He was ambitious, eager to prove himself to his superiors, and completely convinced that he understood military protocol better than most people on the base. The exercise was routine: test the personnel's response to various emergency codes, see how quickly they could implement security procedures, identify any gaps in their training. Morrison had been given a list of classified emergency codes, most of them relics from operations that had been declassified or disbanded years earlier. These codes were supposed to be meaningless now, historical footnotes that existed only to test whether soldiers would properly report unknown protocols to their superiors. At exactly 6:30 a.m., as the morning shift was getting into full swing, Morrison positioned himself at the center of the main hangar complex. He raised his megaphone and, with the confident authority of someone who believed he was conducting a routine exercise, shouted across the concrete expanse, "Shadow Phoenix 7, full security breach protocol. All personnel implement emergency lockdown procedures." He expected confusion, maybe some questions about proper emergency procedures. Perhaps a few soldiers would ask what Shadow Phoenix 7 meant, giving him the opportunity to explain that unknown code should be reported up the chain of command immediately. He didn't expect anyone to actually respond to it, especially not the cleaning woman from Hangar 7. But 50 meters away, bent over a mop bucket with her back to the main complex, Maria Stone went completely still. The sound of that code, Shadow Phoenix 7, hit her like a physical blow. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, she remained frozen in place, her hands gripping the mop handle so tightly her knuckles went white beneath the worn fabric of her gloves. Shadow Phoenix 7. She hadn't heard those words in 8 years. According to every official record in the military database, the only people who knew that code were dead, According to the classified files that were buried so deep they required presidential authorization access, Shadow Unit had been completely eliminated during a Black Ops mission at the Syrian border in 2015. According to those same files, Staff Sergeant Maria Elena Stone had been killed in action along with the rest of her team. Those files were wrong. Maria slowly straightened up, her movements deliberate and controlled. She set down her cleaning supplies without a backward glance and removed her cloth cap for the first time since anyone at the base could remember. Her face, now fully visible in the morning light, was marked by experience and scarred by operations conducted in places where failure meant death. And she began walking toward the command center with the purposeful stride of someone responding to operational orders. Lieutenant Morrison watched her approach with growing confusion that quickly transformed into alarm. This wasn't how the drill was supposed to go. Cleaning personnel weren't supposed to respond to emergency codes at all, let alone walk directly toward classified command systems with the confidence of someone who belonged there. "Ma'am," he called out as she passed him without acknowledgement, "this is a restricted security area. I need you to return to your assigned duties immediately." But Maria wasn't listening. She moved through the security checkpoint as if she owned it, approaching the main access panel for the command center's second-level systems. Systems that required colonel-level authorization just to view, let alone access. Morrison's training kicked in. He reached for his radio, calling for backup while trying to intercept a woman who was clearly about to breach security protocols in a way that would end his career if he couldn't stop it. "Command, this is Morrison. We have unauthorized personnel attempting to access secure systems. Possible security breach in progress. Request immediate assistance." But Maria had already reached the security panel. From somewhere in her coveralls, she produced a thin black access card, one that Morrison had never seen before. That wasn't registered in any system he knew about. The card itself looked old, worn around the edges, like something that had been carried for years. She swiped it through the reader with practiced ease. The system accepted her credentials immediately. Green lights flashed across the panel and the main display activated, showing system diagnostics that Morrison had never seen before. Then, in large letters across the screen, a message appeared that made his blood run cold. "Shadow, 7 access approved, operator, M.E. Stone status, active." Morrison stared at the screen in disbelief. This was impossible. The second-level command protocols had been installed only 6 months ago. No civilian personnel had been trained on them. No one outside of senior command staff even knew they existed. Maria spoke for the first time since he'd known her, her voice carrying a quiet authority that made him instinctively step back. When Shadow Phoenix 7 is called Lieutenant, those who recognize the code respond immediately. No questions, no hesitation, no delays. That's how the protocol was designed. Her fingers moved across the control interface with the practiced efficiency of someone who had used these systems many times before, which should have been impossible, since these particular systems hadn't existed until 6 months ago. The alarms that began sounding weren't part of Morrison's drill. These were real unauthorized access alarms, the kind that brought security teams running and ended careers. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Colonel David Chun burst through command center doors, flanked by 2 senior officers and followed by 4 armed security personnel. At 52 years old, Chun had commanded Northern Command for 3 years and had served in classified operations for over 2 decades. He'd seen security breaches before, but nothing quite like this. The sight that greeted him defied everything he thought he knew about his own base. The quiet cleaning woman, a person he'd passed in the hallways dozens of times without a second thought, was standing at the main command console, her fingers dancing across controls that required the highest level of security clearance to even approach. "Who authorized this access?" Chin demanded, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made junior officers stand straighter and senior personnel listen carefully. Maria turned around slowly, removing her work gloves for the first time in 8 months. The hands that emerged were marked with scars, some from knife wounds, others from electrical burns, all of them telling stories of operations conducted in places where medical care was a luxury and survival was never guaranteed. When she looked up at Colonel Chun, her eyes held something that made him pause. Not fear, not defiance, but the kind of calm recognition that comes when old colleagues meet unexpectedly after years of separation. Colonel Chun, she said quietly, her voice carrying just enough inflection to make it clear that this wasn't the first time they'd met. Don't you recognize me? It's been 8 years, but I don't think I've changed that much. Chin stared at her, his mind racing through decades of classified operations, trying to place a face that seemed familiar but shouldn't exist. Then, like pieces of a puzzle suddenly clicking into place, recognition dawned. "Maria Stone," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "But that's impossible. You were declared killed in action during the Shadow Phoenix operation in 2015. I read the casualty reports myself." "Officially, yes," Maria replied, her expression never changing. "According to the records, Staff Sergeant Maria Elena Stone died along with the rest of Shadow Unit during a classified operation that never officially happened. But Shadow operators don't die, Colonel. We just fade into the background until we're needed again." Lieutenant Morrison, who had been standing in stunned silence, finally found his voice. "Ma'am, I don't understand. Aren't you supposed to be maintenance personnel?" Colonel Chun answered without taking his eyes off Maria, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone in the room understand they were witnessing something extraordinary. "Son, this woman once infiltrated 3 separate enemy installations in a single night and disabled their entire communications network using nothing but a multi-tool and a basic understanding of Soviet-era electronics. She's the only confirmed survivor in an operation that saved an entire city from carpet bombing, and she did it while wounded and cut off from all support. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to quiet down, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Chun gestured for his security team to clear the room, leaving only himself, Morrison, and Maria in the command center. Once the doors were secured, he activated privacy protocols that would ensure their conversation never appeared in any official record. "Maria," he said, his voice softer now, "I need to understand what's happening here. Are you still operational? Are you working under orders from someone I should know about?" Maria's expression remained carefully neutral as she responded. "I'm whatever this base needs me to be, Colonel, but I'm not here to return active duty. I'm here because this installation has security vulnerabilities that could get everyone stationed here killed if they're not addressed." She turned back to the command console and began entering a series of commands that brought up diagnostic displays Morrison had never seen before. The screens filled with data, network topologies, communication protocols, defensive systems configurations, all analyzed in ways that revealed weaknesses and potential points of failure. "This base has 23 critical security flaws," Maria continued, her fingers highlighting problem areas on the display. "Your radar systems are using outdated encryption protocols that can be broken by anyone with a decent computer in 3 days of processing time. Your communication networks are vulnerable to jamming attacks using equipment that can be purchased online for less than $5,000. Your hangar security systems could be overridden remotely using exploits that were published on Hacker Forum 6 months ago." Colonel Chin studied the displays, his expression growing more concerned with each revelation. "How did you identify all of these vulnerabilities?" "I've been here for 8 months, Colonel. Every day, while performing my cleaning duties, I've been conducting a comprehensive security assessment. I've mapped every system, tested every protocol, identified every weakness. It's what shadow operators do. We observe, we analyze, we prepare." Morrison, who had been listening with growing amazement, asked, "But why didn't you report these issues through normal channels? Why maintain this cover identity?" Maria turned to look at him, and for the first time, there was something almost like sympathy in her expression. Because Shadow Unit was disbanded for political reasons, Lieutenant, not operational ones. There are people in Washington who would rather ignore security problems than acknowledge that they made a mistake when they shut down our program. Official reports get buried. Unofficial observations get acted upon. Colonel Chun was beginning to understand the scope of what had been happening under his command. "Maria, are you telling me that this base has been under unofficial protection for 8 months?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you. Every potential threat has been monitored. Every vulnerability has been documented. Every countermeasure has been prepared. You've been safe because someone was watching, even if you didn't know it. The weight of this revelation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Chen realized that while he'd been focused on official reports and standard procedures, one of the military's most skilled operatives had been conducting covert operations right under his nose. "What triggered you to reveal yourself now?" he asked. Maria's smile was barely visible, but it carried years of hard-earned wisdom. Because Lieutenant Morrison did exactly what the Shadow Phoenix Protocol was designed for. When someone calls that code, the people who understand its significance respond immediately. The system worked perfectly. Over the following days, word of the cleaning lady revelation spread to the base like wildfire, but not in the way Morrison had expected. Instead of gossip and rumors, there was a profound shift in how personnel viewed their environment and their responsibilities. Young soldiers who had walked past Maria hundreds of times began to realize they had been in the presence of operational excellence and had been too distracted by their assumptions to recognize it. They started paying attention to details they had previously ignored. The way she had always positioned herself near critical systems during her rounds, how she had checked emergency equipment that wasn't on any maintenance schedule, the quiet confidence with which she moved through restricted areas. Sergeant Mike Davis, a 24-year-old radar technician who had often seen Maria cleaning around his equipment, approached Colonel Chen with a request that would change the trajectory of his career. "Sir, would it be possible to receive training from the former cleaning lady? From Sergeant Stone? I've been thinking about how much I didn't notice, and I realize I might not be as good at my job as I thought I was." Similar requests came from across the base, not for formal military instruction, but for lessons in situational awareness, in recognizing threats that didn't fit standard patterns, in understanding that the most important skills couldn't be learned from manuals. Colonel Chun brought the request to Maria, who was still maintaining her cleaning duties while the base adjusted to the new reality of her presence. "They want to learn from you," he said. "What would you teach them?" Maria considered the question carefully before responding. "I would teach them to see what's actually there instead of what they expect to see. I would teach them that the person who doesn't belong might be the person keeping them safe. And I would teach them that real preparation means being ready for situations that haven't been invented yet." The request was approved, but with strict conditions. No official records, no publicity, no recognition that might compromise Maria's ability to operate undercover if necessary. The training sessions became known informally as shadow awareness exercises, small groups of personnel learning to observe their environment with the intensity of someone whose life depended on noticing details. The first training session took place in Hangar 7 at 5 a.m. with Sergeant Davis and 3 other volunteers. Maria had transformed the space into something that looked more like a meditation room than a military training facility. No electronic equipment, no computers, no modern training aids. Just people learning to trust their instincts and observations over technology that could fail or be compromised. "Close your eyes," Maria instructed the group. "For the next 5 minutes, I want you to identify every sound you can hear, every vibration you can feel, every change in air pressure or temperature. Don't just listen, analyze. What do these sounds tell you about what's happening on this base right now?" Sergeant Davis closed his eyes and tried to focus. At first, all he heard was noise, engines running, people walking, equipment operating. But gradually, as Maria had taught him to do, he began to separate individual sounds and understand what they meant. "I can hear 3 different types of aircraft engines," he said. 2 are running routine maintenance cycles, but 1 sounds like it's being prepped for flight. There are approximately 15 people moving around a hangar complex, but 3 of them are walking with a different rhythm. Either they're carrying heavy equipment, or they're not military personnel." "Good," Maria said. "What else?" Davis concentrated harder. "The air conditioning system in Building C is running at higher capacity than normal, which probably means there's increased electronic equipment operating in that building. Someone is using a welding torch in Hangar 4, and there's a vehicle approaching the main gate that has a different engine signature than our standard fleet." When Davis opened his eyes, Maria was nodding with approval. "That vehicle you heard belongs to a maintenance contractor that wasn't scheduled to arrive until next week," she said. "The welding in Hangar 4 is being done by someone who isn't following proper safety protocols. They're working too fast and not allowing enough cooling time between welds. The increased air conditioning in Building C is because someone left a bank of computer servers running overnight, which violates energy conservation protocols and might indicate unauthorized activity. The group stared at her in amazement. In 5 minutes of careful listening, she had identified security issues, safety violations, and operational irregularities that the base's official monitoring systems had missed. "How do you know all of that just from listening?" asked Private Jennifer Walsh, a communications specialist who had been struggling with threat detection protocols. "Practice," Maria replied simply. 15 years of operations where the difference between coming home and not coming home was whether you could read an environment accurately. But more importantly, you all just demonstrated that you have the same ability. You identified those patterns yourselves. I just taught you how to interpret what you were already hearing. Word of Maria's training methods spread quietly through the base, but not through official channels. Soldiers who completed her exercises showed dramatic improvements in their regular duties. Faster response times, better threat detection, improved situational awareness. More importantly, they began to understand that security wasn't about having the right equipment. It was about having the right mindset. Colonel Chin requested a private briefing on the training program's effectiveness. "The results are remarkable," he told Maria during one of their weekly meetings. "Equipment malfunctions are being caught earlier. Security protocols are being followed more consistently, and overall base readiness has improved by measurable margins. How are you accomplishing this?" Maria's answer was characteristically direct. "I'm teaching them to think like operatives instead of technicians. Technicians fix problems after they occur. Operatives prevent problems before they develop. The skills are the same: observation, analysis, rapid decision-making. The difference is in the mindset." She gestured toward the window overlooking the main hangar complex, where young soldiers were going about their daily duties with a new awareness of their environment. These soldiers have been trained to follow procedures and operate equipment, but they haven't been taught to see the bigger picture. They know how to respond to threats that fit established patterns, but they don't know how to recognize threats that are designed to avoid detection. "And you're teaching them that?" "I'm teaching them to trust their instincts and verify their assumptions. Most security breaches happen because someone noticed something unusual but convinced themselves it wasn't important. Most operational failures occur because someone had the information needed to prevent them but didn't know how to interpret what they were seeing." Colonel Chun leaned back in his chair, processing the implications of what Maria was telling him. "You're essentially creating a new type of soldier, one who thinks like an intelligence operative but functions within standard military structure." "I'm helping them become what they already have the potential to be," Maria corrected. "Every soldier has the capacity for this kind of awareness. Most of them just haven't been taught to develop it." 3 months after her identity was revealed, Maria made a decision that surprised everyone who had come to depend on her presence. She requested a meeting with Colonel Chun to discuss her future at the base. "I need to leave," she told him without preamble. "My mission here is complete." Chin had been expecting this conversation, but he still felt unprepared for it. "Maria, you've become an integral part of this installation security. The training program you developed is the most effective thing we've ever implemented. Why leave now?" "Because the goal was never to create dependency," Maria replied. "The goal was to create capability. The soldiers here now understand how to observe their environment, how to recognize anomalies, how to think proactively about security. They don't need me anymore. But the program could be expanded. Other bases could benefit from what you've developed here. You could train instructors, develop curriculum, create something that could improve military readiness across all branches of service." Maria shook her head. Shadow Unit was disbanded because it became too visible, too bureaucratic, too focused on institutional preservation rather than operational effectiveness. "I won't make that mistake again. This isn't about creating a program. It's about changing how individual soldiers think. And that change has to happen one person at a time, organically, without institutional interference." She reached into her pocket and placed her black access card on Chen's desk. "If someone calls Shadow Phoenix 7 again and I'm not here to respond, give this card to whoever steps forward. Not whoever is ordered to step forward. Whoever chooses to step forward. That's how you'll know you found the right person." Colonel Chin picked up the card. turning it over in his hands. It felt heavier than such a small object should, weighted with years of classified operations and unwritten history. Who is the right person? He asked. Someone who listens more than they speak. Someone who observes more than they assume. Someone who feels responsibility for others without being told to feel it. Someone who understands that the most important battles are often fought by people whose names never appear in official records. The next morning, Maria didn't appear for her 4 a.m. shift. Her locker had been cleaned out, her access badges returned, her few personal belongings removed. The only trace of her presence was a handwritten note left on the training area bulletin board in Hangar 7. Shadow operators don't disappear. We just change frequency. If you listen carefully, you'll always know when we're needed. The note wasn't signed, but everyone understood who had written it. The training area in Hangar 7 remained active, but now it was run by soldiers who had learned Maria's methods and adapted them to their own leadership styles. Sergeant Davis became the unofficial coordinator, organizing exercises that combined traditional military training with the observational techniques Maria had taught them. The transformation was subtle but profound. Base security improved dramatically as personnel began to notice irregularities they had previously ignored. Equipment functioned more reliably because people were paying attention to early warning signs of malfunction. Most importantly, the soldiers began to understand that expertise didn't always announce itself, that the most valuable knowledge often came from the most unexpected sources. Years passed. The soldiers who had trained under Maria were transferred to other installations, carrying her lessons with them. They became known for their exceptional situational awareness, their ability to detect threats before they materialized, their understanding that real security work was mostly invisible. Some of them became instructors themselves, passing on what they had learned not through formal curriculum, but through example, to the quiet confidence that comes from understanding that the most important guardian could be the person everyone overlooks. And sometimes late at night when the base was quiet, personnel on duty would report hearing footsteps in the empty hangars, someone checking the emergency systems that everyone else had got to maintain, someone making sure the next generation was ready for threats they couldn't imagine. But no one was ever there when they looked. Or maybe they just weren't paying close enough attention. Maybe Maria had been right all along. The most important protectors are usually the ones you don't see coming. If you believe in stories like this, where heroes hide in plain sight and protection comes from people you'd never suspect, share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories of the quiet guardians who keep us safe without ever asking for recognition.